this evening. Everybody, welcome to our second interview tonight with Mickey Furman. She is a Louisiana bred, Mickey comes by her chops, honestly. I don't know if you wrote that or who did on your website, but I love that. She grew up in a home with a perpetual soundtrack of classic country. I'm all about that and country western music, including Ray Charles, Jerry Lee Lewis, and the Sons of the Pioneers. Now, I don't remember that. By the age of 7, but some of you may have, she was singing in her grandmother's rural church at 13. She joined a contemporary Christian music band, and by 15 was headlining Shreveport's venerable Louisiana Hayride. She recorded her MCA and Word records for both of those music publishing groups, and becoming one of the earliest artists to span both secular and Christian markets. Mickey guarded guest spots on the Grand Ole Opry and toured with several major artists. Wow. So Back Porch Torch in 2005, I think, was the first, and had been quite a hiatus, as we mentioned earlier, with the music. Right. And then a new one, Westbound, which I love it. I'm going to go.
Oh, thank you.
Myself. Seriously, good stuff. But Mickey, can you take us back to your roots? But
okay.
I want to thank you, as I have with many of the artists that at least the ones I followed years ago, and I didn't realize that you had some new stuff until a few months ago. But as many did that get saved early in their life, I appreciated and cut my teeth on your 2 releases, the gospel albums, Never Alone and Never Again, and Angels Watching Over Me. Look Again. Sorry.
Look Again. Yes.
One was pink and one was blue.
Well, that's right. Pink and blue. I am so tickled that you even remember those. That's been a really long time ago, back in the 1900s, I like to say.
Well, 1979 and 80, right? I think.
Oh yeah, I was literally in my teens. I started young.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think I joined a contemporary Christian music was very new when I broke into it. In fact, I was 13 when I joined a band called the Jesus Christ Power and Light Company out of Louisiana.
Okay, I've heard of them. Yeah.
And we toured all the little churches around Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, and I ended up at 15 headlining the Louisiana Hayride in Shreveport, and that was the game changer, I think. And I came in, really, I'd only done gospel music, other than I was raised with, as I said, this classic. My dad had hundreds of the classic country albums, and I knew them all by heart. But I'd only actually performed gospel music live. So when I went to the Hayride, they approached me about doing both, and I said, well, I have no problem with that, because I ended up getting 2 record deals at the same time, which was really strange at that time.
Really?
You have to understand there was no one except, well, Amy Grant,
yes,
and I, and we were among the first to do both secular and Christian music. I was on 2 different labels for that reason. I was on MCA doing kind of adult contemporary or pop country, and then doing the Christian music on Word. But I never had a problem with it, because I thought the whole point of singing the gospel or carrying the gospel was to share it with those who didn't know about it. Call me naive. But.
No, I think actually I would have, and I did then. Later on, I think it became quite an issue in a lot of the churches when Amy first crossed over. But I don't know that she necessarily made the effort. It was just the music that was coming out of her, and maybe except for you. But I would say progressive, and maybe that word is batted around politically.
No,
good,
I think so.
Forward thinking, right? Vision.
Yeah, I think it's a really, it's a realistic way of doing it. In fact, if I could do it again, the problem was it just wasn't accepted to be doing both kinds of music in one album. I wish they weren't separated on 2 labels, because it kind of made me have to either tour Christian music or tour secular music, when really that felt like splitting me in half, because well, yes, I love secular music, and every culture has its secular music,
Mm,
but I also, had Christian beliefs and
mm.
wanted to, and I
Yeah,
just didn't see them being separated.
it became a pejorative word. It's sad to say. I think BJ Thomas
Yeah.
went through that whole thing, and he actually had people boo him at
Oh,
his
yeah,
concerts.
I toured with him.
Did you?
Uh,
Yeah.
yes, and I got a lot of criticism
Mm,
too. And
yeah.
strangely, I got more criticism from the Christian side, but
Mhm. Yeah.
that's okay.
It's okay. Yeah, I mentioned that
all
to
right.
Gloria. She's on my Facebook and was texting her after she lost BJ, and
Yeah,
she was saying that he really did end up getting over it and forgiving the people, which I think is a real testament to his faith in the Lord. And when we lost him, we lost a good one too. with
I
All,
know.
all the
He
music
was a
he
he
put
was a
out.
wonderful friend. He
Yeah,
wrote the liner notes for my Look Again album, and
really. Wow. Yeah.
he was just he was so authentic.
Yes.
Yes, he had a past, he had a rough past,
Yes.
but when he turned things around, it was real.
Mhm.
And yeah, he was just wonderful to work with.
That's amazing. So,
But yeah, just to catch you up after
sure,
that,
yes.
I probably did that up until my early 20s.
Mhm.
And the reason there was a long hiatus was because I stopped and had a family.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
raised a family,
Uh-huh.
went to college finally in my late 20s because, I was performing
Right. Didn't have time.
nonstop and I didn't have time to go to college. I got out of high school a year early just so I could tour and,
Mhm.
it just kind of went on like that. But uh, oddly enough, I got an engineering degree when I went to college. Don't ask me why. It's a long story, but not my natural inclination.
Yeah.
But so
Being
anyway,
artistic and all, that would be the other
yeah,
side of the brain.
I know,
But
I was a creative engineer.
yes.
I did eventually work in commercial construction for a number of years during that period. So, but I'm not doing
Love
that
everything.
anymore. I've come back to
Mhm.
my real love, which is
Yes.
music and writing.
Yeah.
In 2005, I recorded Back Porch Torch,
Okay.
which kind of honored my Louisiana roots. It's a very kind of blue-eyed soul sort of project. I
Mhm.
wrote almost all the songs on it.
Mm.
I think all but one. And so it's kind of runs to the soul R&B thing that I grew up loving that music as a teenager.
Mm.
I wasn't into metal, but I loved, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes and Gladys
Uh-huh.
Knight, and
Yeah.
that really, really helped form my voice. There were a number of singers that influenced me, but that was a big influence.
Mm.
Not only the country, well, Ray Charles, those albums were my favorites because he artfully blended soul and country,
Yes.
and that was kind of what I wanted to do with Back Porch Torch.
Yeah. Amazing. Now, when you your influences, and you said your dad had hundreds of the old country albums, the old
Yep.
style country. There's this big discussion. It has been for quite some time. And by the way, I think Ken Burns does a fabulous job with the
Oh
recent
yeah,
documentary on country music. It is amazing.
it
I'll go
is.
back and get the episodes I lost because there were some that were on PBS free, but all the way from the Carters, Appalachian Sound to today's country. But there are a number of people who say, well, it's again, here's another criticism with secular, although not so much secular gospel, but a country became or has become, some people say, too popish, and it's lost its roots with what some people like to pejorative call it twang. I enjoy both old style,
Yeah.
new, but maybe you can comment on that, and we'll get back to how.
Well, it's cycles. It's right up there with, your grandpa fussing about these darn kids these days. Music is the same way.
Yeah.
When I came along with my contemporary Christian music, which as we look back was perfectly acceptable in the 70s, but hey, we would play in these little churches with our drums and electric guitars, and
Yeah.
people covered their ears. They weren't accustomed to it. So it takes a while for people to, music changes, people change, the
right.
people making the music
Mhm.
change.
Yes.
And what's happening now, I suppose this is because we we have access to so many different kinds of music now through
Mhm.
live streaming, and just we just know so much more about music history. And
Mm.
so I see it turning into it. I don't think it will ever be one kind of music, but there's this wonderful fusion happening. You
That's
can still
a good way to
find
put it. I like
really
that.
solid country people,
Yes.
country music, people doing that. You can, I mean, I listen to everything.
Me too.
Uh, yeah, I do. And I learned, I've spent a lot of time listening to jazz that
Mhm.
has influenced my voice too. And
Mm.
so, so back to Westbound, you were
Mm.
talking about
Yes.
influences. Um, I, I guess probably, as I said, Gladys Knight was a little bit there. I loved those altos from the 70s, Karen Carpenter and Anne Marie, and
Mm.
you know, they they really, I don't know, they just had such wonderful control.
Yes.
Linda Ronstadt is just
Yeah,
matchless. I mean, the woman could sing anything.
sure could.
And I sort of, I can't, I'll never measure up to that, but I kind of put myself in that camp.
Mm.
I've now done Christian music, contemporary Christian music. I've done pop country. I did this kind of soul album.
Mhm.
Now there's a Western album that, to me, I hear all of those things in this album. And it really is my love letter to Western music, which my dad adored. He was born in North Dakota
Uh-huh.
and raised in Minnesota. That's why I'm here in Minnesota, actually.
Uh-huh.
Um, but he was a cowboy, and
Mm.
he loved, when in his youth, and he knew all of those old songs. And in my on my Westbound album, which is right here,
Yes, and it is
I
beautiful.
dedicate this to him, who
Yeah.
for singing us all those old songs.
Yes.
So
Buffalo Gal, when you come out tonight, and What a Moon. And
that was
again, I
fun.
wish I could have played a few of them when you came on, but I was explaining to my audience that it's so difficult with Zoom. It's not like the radio went back in Maine when we had just doing the radio. And I love the fact that we've got Zoom so we can see our guests now, where before we couldn't.
Right.
But many people would think of Buffalo Gals from the Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life.
Mhm.
That is a cowboy song. And maybe you could explain to the audience the difference between, because really the sound even is different, and it's enjoyable. Believe me, it's completely enjoyable than even the old country. There is this up and down cadence. You can almost feel like you're riding the horse more
Yeah.
so. And you could think about out west and the campfires and moving the cattle. Or am I all wet and saying it, describing that? What?
Well, I came
Okay.
in, I'd been collecting songs for this Western album for years. I wrote about, I think I wrote 5 of the 11 songs.
Mhm.
And then I would just kind of curating, trying to find some Western songs that had not been recorded very much.
Mhm.
We did an old Sons of the Pioneers song called Blue Prairie, which I
Mm.
think Michael Martin Murphy had a recording of it, but
Oh,
it
my.
hasn't really been recorded that much.
Mhm.
And so I just love the melody. I'm a big melody person. And then I found River of No Return from the old movie,
Mhm.
River of No Return, with Robert Mitchum and Marilyn Monroe. The cool thing that started happening with this, because I've lived in Nashville for a long time, you make friends with not only the artists, but also you're kind of friends with their families. Well, Tennessee Ernie Ford sang the theme River of No Return in the movie.
Mhm.
He happened to be the guy who broke me onto national television. He did a PBS special. I don't know. I don't know when it was, probably around 1980, something like that. And I was kind of the new kid that he plugged into the show with a
Oh,
bunch of
cool. Wow.
big stars. And so he gave me my national television break.
Mm.
Well, I met his son, Buck Ford, at that taping,
Really?
and just would see him over the years. And when I started putting this album together, I thought, it'd be kind of fun to pull in some friends on this. So
Uh-huh.
when I did River of No Return, I called Buck and asked him if he'd be interested in doing some backgrounds on it. And he said, sure. So
Yes,
I have, I have
That
Buck.
is so cool.
I know, Buck channeling his father's
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's almost like
character.
come full circle, right?
It is.
Maybe
And
your way
then,
of saying thank you.
yes, I know, and honoring that,
Uh-huh.
that break. And
Yeah,
also I had to do a Marty Robbins song. I mean, there's no way I was
yeah,
not
yeah.
gonna do a Marty Robbins song.
Uh-huh.
He was also a Louisiana hayride who was always introduced as had a tear in his voice and a tear in his britches.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
But I
Tear in his
listened,
voice.
all of his Western songs have been recorded quite a lot, but
Uh-huh.
I stumbled across this little love song that I'd never heard before called "Is There Any Chance?" And it
Mm.
just touched my heart. I thought it sounded Western in at least melodically,
Okay.
if not in lyric. It's just a love song.
Mm.
So I called up his son Ronnie, who
Mm.
was an artist about the same time I was,
Mhm.
back in the 80s, and asked him if he'd sing a duet with me.
Wow.
He was very tentative at first. He said, "Well, I haven't been in the studio in years and years and years." I said, "Just, it'll be fun. We'll
Mhm.
just see what happens."
Mhm.
And it was wonderful. I mean, he started singing, and he's his own voice, but man, can you hear those Robbins genes in there when he, just the
That's
and
amazing.
that's one of my favorite cuts on
So
there.
he's on that particular song with you. So
Mhm.
wow. The process of how you sit down to write, is your music, is your instrument of choice the piano, guitar?
I am a piano player. Yes, I am.
So when you sit down, you just sit down and kind of start, you get in a mood, and then a song comes to you, or does the song play in your mind before you sit down at the piano? How does that work? Because I always love to ask that question to the guests that we've had on our show. And I get a variety of answers, but I'm interested in what maybe you might want to share.
Well, interestingly, I wrote a song called Stories That the Rocks Tell, and it's on the Westbound album
Mhm.
about that very thing, about how writing stories and writing songs, if you chase it too hard, you
Mhm.
can't, it's elusive.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's more organic than that.
Mm.
I, I get, I'm going to go a little deeply philosophical here
Sure, go ahead.
about music, but every culture, as I said, has music,
Mhm.
and cultures that never heard other cultures singing music came up with their own. It just
Mm.
sprang up within each
Gift
of
of
the
God.
groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, and interestingly, for instance, Native Americans,
Mhm.
they have their own songs, and even before they got our missionaries,
Mm. Yes.
they recognized there was a creator, and they would
Yes.
sing these songs
Yep.
about everything in the world. And um, anyway, I feel like music is just sort of radiating.
Mm.
This is very strange. I've always maintained that good songs to me kind of already exist.
Mhm.
It's like archaeology.
Mm.
You're uncovering what the song knows what it wants to be.
That's a great metaphor.
And if you use a shovel,
Mhm.
get in a hurry, you're going to tear it all up.
Mm.
It's not going to, but if you use a brush and you're careful and just kind of honor, okay, what do you want to do now? Where do you want to go? It comes out intact. And so I'm a slow writer usually. There have been a few that came quickly.
Mm.
And which comes first, it just all depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm not that would make a great title. I'm not that kind of writer. I'm more of an idea person. I start thinking about an idea,
Mhm.
and as I think about it and turn it over, then it turns into lyrics, and often the music shows up at the same time to support it. I'm
Yeah.
actually doing a workshop with a friend named Jim Jones on June 3rd and 4th. That's sponsored by the International Western Music Association Tennessee chapter.
Wow.
And so that's something that, if you want to go to the IWMA Tennessee Facebook page, there's information to register for that. But we're going to talk about story songs.
Yeah,
And
because
the
we're
process
losing the
around it.
stories as our next generations come up through with. We've
Mhm.
lost the art of passing story along, whether it's music in written form, and that's a big part of how we feel like we belong to family, to
Sure.
society, or culture. And there's such an anonymity. This has not helped. And we're always on it. I'll admit, but I don't think it's helped because our connection has become less
Right.
intimate and
Well,
more.
Yes, that's true. I mean, you even think about pictures. We don't have photographs anymore. It's all on our phones. And,
Yeah, so,
you know, my grandchildren or my great grandchildren are going to say, well, where are all the pictures of you? And it's like, oh, they're probably in a cloud somewhere. I don't know.
not so,
But
yeah.
I wrote songs for a long time. I started writing in my teens. I
Mhm.
wrote, you know, a lot of the songs on those Christian albums and about, I guess it was around 2014, 2013, I had written a song for the Back Porch Torch album called Vicksburg 1863. It's a Civil War song. It
Mhm.
was 5.5, 6 minutes long.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I've written half a book here. So I got interested in writing short stories. So I started writing short stories set in the American West. And those were the seeds planted for this
For
Western
this
album.
album, wow.
And so I joined, you know, Western Writers of America and started releasing short stories and got some attention. And now I'm working on a book and yeah, so I'm doing a lot of different things, but
Mhm.
it's like they feed off each other. you
Yeah,
know.
it's almost more natural or organic, if I could say that.
Mhm.
Where you're not making that effort that ends up playing you out and expending energy that is really
Yeah.
not helping the product. I wanted to say this too, you were mentioning the whole philosophy of art and music. Um, I remember a song doing this to me where you said something to the effect of you almost felt like the song was already made for you out there. But I remember hearing Jay Unger and Molly Madison's Ashcan Farewell of Ken Burns' Civil War documentary. And for the very first time, a teacher I worked with back home in Maine played it for her students, and I was mesmerized. It's almost like before I even knew it was on the documentary, I knew what the song was about.
Oh, wow.
And I read that some other people actually felt the same way. They had to stop the car and get off the side of the road because they were weeping.
Right.
And it's
I
there's no words to it. And then later on, when you find out that the movie put Sullivan Blues, his last letter to his wife to the music, like, wow, that makes sense. You know, his last, wow. So maybe
I
some
know.
of
I have this belief that the perfect song could exist in any era, in any genre.
yes.
It can be sung as a blues song, it can be sung as a country song, or whatever. You
Yeah.
know, if it's, that's the bar that I strive for, is to write a classic sounding song.
Mhm.
I had some wonderful mentors. I don't write a lot with anybody now. I usually write alone, but I did have some co-writers early on that taught me so much. My first co-writer was the late Roger Bowling, who was just coming off
Mhm.
Lucille, Coward of the County.
Oh,
Just
wow.
wonderful story songwriter.
Uh-huh.
And he was very patient and told me, gave me little tips and, you know, told me what to do. A later mentor was Red Lane, who wrote a lot of country songs for Tammy Wynette, Merle Haggard. And the first thing he said was, before you even start writing this song, after you get the idea, decide how you want people to feel at the end of it. And that's the nugget. It's got to make you feel something. And you're talking about pulling off the side of the road.
Yeah.
First when I heard He Stopped Loving Her Today, I did
Yeah.
the same thing. You know, and it's not only the line and the story, but even the melody, you know, is part of it. It's just a good song elicits a response emotionally.
It's almost like the sound goes with the lyric in an uncanny way that only God could embed that into humanity.
Yeah.
And I know there's a word to that. I've got a friend, Kevin Sullivan. He may be watching now from New York. He writes and plays music, and he's been to writers' workshops. But he told me what the word for that was. I don't know. But there's some technical word for when the lyrics and the sound come together in a synergy that is just more than memorable.
And they don't always have to be deep songs. I
No,
mean,
right, no,
I've got some really indulgent songs that are dumb and they're ditties, and I love them. And when they come
Yeah.
on the radio, I crank them
Yeah.
up and sing along. I
Yes.
mean, that's eliciting a response too.
Sure is.
Emotion of happiness, you know. It
Yeah,
doesn't have
you
to
don't
be.
get enough of.
That's right. That's
So
right.
you really said it well when you talked about emotion, because uh, we have such a plethora of emotions that run through our soul that need to be expressed and vented. And if maybe we can't because we're not musically inclined, somebody
Doesn't
else
matter.
can for us. And so
Doesn't
turn the
matter.
radio on, listen to the music while it plays, turn the radio
Yeah.
on.
And a song, I mean, you can hear a song that you haven't heard since the fourth grade,
Mhm.
and you remember what
Mm.
you were wearing. You know, you remember the moment.
Yeah.
And also another aspect to music that I have discovered. I've always thought there was a kind of magic to it, but
Mhm.
I started volunteering to write with PTSD veterans some years ago. It's a wonderful Operation Song is what
Okay.
it's called. It's based out
Right
of
now,
Nashville,
yeah.
and they work with vets who've many of them have never really told their stories, and they're just kind of emotionally crippled,
Mhm.
and they find out about us. They pair each one of them with a songwriter, and we have one day, and the first half of the day is just asking questions and tell me your story.
Sure.
And that's the tear. I mean, everybody's bawling, and
I
it's just,
would be,
you know,
yeah.
and sometimes I have had some tell me I've never told this story
Oh
before,
my gosh, wow.
but I have to get it out.
Yes.
So then we work on the song together, and I try to honor. It's not me writing their story. I make them help me,
Mm.
and I try to turn it into, you know, words and music.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we have a recital and we sing them all. And I've heard back from some of these folks, and they say,
Seriously.
that was the turning point when I started feeling like I was healing. Music heals. It's just,
That is so cool that
it's
that's
the, it's
out
the
there.
coolest thing.
I know, we know the dogs go to the nursing homes and veterans homes and people visit, and there's lots of good things, but I'd never heard that
Yeah.
done.
It's wonderful. It's the coolest thing I do.
Wow. Well, Mickey, our time is up. It's been a long day for you, I'm sure. I am going to,
Westbound, you can
yes,
find this thing on, is that
What's the-
backwards? I don't know.
MickeyFurmanMusic.com. And
MickeyFurmanMusic.com. Yeah.
what I found really cool about, and I told them this before you came on, just that's because I had to sync up, is that you don't just give a 2-second, 1-second sampler of those songs. It's pretty extensive. So that, man, I was glad to be able to hear them all. It's like you talk about a body of work where you don't have an A side or a B side of the 44, 45 with a B. It's not as good. Every song has unique
Aw, well,
character
thank
to it.
you.
So we're definitely going to grab it. We'll probably Spotify or something, because we have our
Well,
Spotify.
it's doing well.
Yeah.
I'm really, really tickled at the
That's good.
response.
We were just looking for music to travel to Maine with our dogs by. So that'll be something we'll put
Aw,
on.
thank you.
So thank you for being with
It's
us
been
tonight.
wonderful to visit with you. So
Yes.
nice to see your face finally after.
Yeah, exactly.
That's-
Maybe we can do this again.
I would love
catch up with you. Is there anything, I always like to close, if you would mind, our prayer for our guests? Anything that you want to share, just to continue to pray that God will give you health and strength and keep touring? Or
Well, we live in very, very troubled times,
you?
and it's really rough out there.
Mhm.
Um, what I'm trying to teach myself is the great commandment only told us to love,
Mhm.
didn't tell us to judge,
Right.
didn't tell us to, you know,
Mhm.
be mean because somebody didn't feel the same way we did.
Right.
Only told to love. And I think love is that's what we got to do.
That's right. All right. Well, let's close in prayer. I'm just going to say a prayer for you and
Thank
for this great time. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for the privilege of sharing with this dear lady whose music I found. Let's see, well, we won't count the years. Back in the day, Lord, among all the Christian albums you gave me, those two, and now learning about how you steered Mickey's heart and life once she raised a family back to producing music again to bless people with old sounds and new sounds and new lines and thoughts and messages. God, I pray that you bless her life in every aspect, in every way. And Lord, we agree together, the both of us, that Father, in these trying times when there is so much judgment, and we know there's a right and a wrong, but Lord, help us to learn what Paul said, that we can speak the truth in love, that we may grow up in all things, and that we can be loving in our dealings and our relationships with other people, and work together for the greater causes that are out there, Lord. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much.
God bless you, dear. And we'll be in touch.
Right. Hope so.
Have a good evening.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for being